and the comedy?
Uh, no, actually, it was they filmed like a showcase during the pandemic, and it was just kind of live comedy on there. And I was one of the writers on the show itself. So
Yeah, I saw you were one of the writers.
Yeah.
Broadway Comedy Club's my favorite club.
Yeah, it's a fun club. Absolutely. It's like, are we going now? Cool. All right.
We are live. You can share this all over.
Yeah, I'm like, are we just like chit-chatting, or is this the real thing?
I kind of like to open it where we're already talking, like they're just accidentally watching us rather than real stiff.
No, I like it. Keeps it real. I like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I it's interesting where we're at, because I feel like the last time we talked was during the pandemic stuff, and like nobody was really performing. And I think right when we were talking, I was working on a Zoom album, and that was something I was working on. And that was kind of one of the things during the pandemic that a lot of us weren't touring, and so we had to kind of come up with interesting, creative ways to make money and to get our comedy out there. And I think the last time I talked, that's what I was working on, and it went really well. And I got it on SiriusXM, which was the goal. So it was like the first Zoom album to be on SiriusXM, and they put it in rotation. And so that was something that I was really proud of at the time, because it was just almost impossible, because you know how it is with Zooms. I mean, how's it going to sound? Can you hear the laughs? Everybody going to sound like Darth Vader? Like, is my internet going to go out in the middle? Like, so there's other stresses added on to like a Zoom recording that you don't have in a theater or a comedy club or whatever when you're doing an album. And so, I got to work with some people at Comedy Hub, and this comedian, Anthony Capper, helped me like produce it, and he's kind of a sound engineer. So anyway, it turned out really well, and it's been in rotation for a while. So that was one of the things that I was doing. And the Broadway Comedy Club thing, that was just a showcase thing they were doing, and I just wrote a little bit on that. But it was but that's a great club. I started comedy with Al Martin, and the owner of the Broadway Comedy Club, and I was his bus boy at the New York Comedy Club on 24th Street when he owned it. And so that's kind of how I got my start. I was, I was also the cook. So I would, and we had a full kitchen at the time, and it was crazy. I would cook, and I would be a busboy. I would drop mozzarella sticks. I remember one time I was, and I would get stage time, for this, and I get a little bit of money, not much. It's more about the stage time. And I remember one time there was like a vent that went from the kitchen into the showroom. And I remember I was cooking and something, and somebody asked me, hey, you want to go up? Nobody's here. And so I was like, yeah. So I left like mozzarella sticks in the fryer, and then I went up on stage, and I was like the only comic. Nobody. So I was up there for probably 10 minutes, 11 minutes. It kept going. All of a sudden, smoke just starts pouring into the showroom, and I was like, did anybody order mozzarella sticks? And it was the funniest thing. And I'm like, okay, I gotta go. And I ran out, like tried to put them out. So it was just really funny. So that's kind of my beginnings, was always like, chaos and paying dues any way that I could. It's funny, a lot of young comics, they want to know how to get out of open mics. They want to know how to like get to the next level, or become a professional, or interact with professional comedians. And I always say, whatever it takes, to work at a comedy club if you can, because I feel like it was my college for stand-up comedy. Like I remember a young Mark Maron, and like a young Todd Barry, and like all these comedians coming through that were just kind of on the rise, and like you just get to see all of these things. And it's an apprenticeship, if you will. I mean, you can't get that anywhere else. And so that's kind of my thing was, when I found stand-up, I knew that I had to kind of be somewhere where it was just around me and I could learn from it. And so that was me being at the New York Comedy Club with Al Martin. And then later on, we did some other things and ran the Boston Comedy Club. And then we worked together at the Broadway, where I had a show up there, which was Greg Giraldo and Patrice O'Neill and Bill Burr. And So it's like, I've been blessed to be around, just the best of the best. And so that's, kind of been my experiences. But so yeah, if your kids out there, stand-up comics, young people, work at a comedy club, answer the phone, hand out
That's so,
flyers. Yeah, do
I
whatever it
love,
takes.
yeah. I've kind of attached myself to Wise Guys here in Vegas, and I go out and bark for them.
Great. Wise guys from the Salt Lake City, Bruce, or what's his name? Keith.
Keith
Yes.
Stubbs. Yeah.
Keith Stubbs. He's a great guy. Yeah, I worked out there. I have a dry bar special coming out, and like he produces dry bar specials and stuff. So yeah, so that was exciting for me because I actually have a interesting history with Utah, because that's where the big clubs there that he has. He has the Vegas Club, and he has one in Ogden, Utah, and one in Salt Lake City, Utah. And there was a stint in my life where I was searching for something. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I met a Mormon girl in high school. My parents were party people, and so the only way to rebel against that was to go the other way. So I became a Mormon missionary, and it was either that or the Navy. I figured it was easier to get out of Mormonism than it was the U.S. Navy. And so I was a missionary. I went to South America. I was with the bicycle with the tag and the tie and the whole thing. And so I spent some time in Provo, Utah. And that's like, they have like a missionary training center and everything. You learn how to speak Spanish and be a missionary and all that stuff. And so I recently went back and performed at Salt Lake City. I was with TJ Miller. We worked together a lot, and I opened that show. And then while I was there, Keith asked me if I wanted, to do the dry bar special, and I was very excited. And so I filmed that probably about 4 months ago. It should be coming out pretty soon, I think. And it was great. It was great doing comedy, in Utah, because my first stand-up comedy club performance was in Idaho at a Mormon college. It was like BYU had like a Idaho branch, and so campus. And so I was that at a Mormon talent show. It was like the first time I ever did stand-up comedy. and I was basically just making fun of Mormons. And I remember, how everybody's just here to get married. Like, it was a whole thing. And I got in so much trouble. Like, everybody was like, he's too edgy. I mean, and I got like a standing ovation. So it was like, I've been chasing that high ever since. And it was one of the best shows I ever had. It was my first show. And so it was a hard one to follow. But I remember they were doing another comedy thing. And I couldn't do it because I was the edgy guy. So even the first, so that's my first comedy was, I was standing ovation, and then I got in trouble, so it's like, it's kind of the story of my career. So,
well, after getting in trouble your first time, did you have to dig down deep to your passion to keep going and accomplish everything you've accomplished?
I mean, it was kind of one of those things where it set me up for things later in life in comedy, but I was so brand new at the thing. I actually, this is the first time I didn't do it after that. Like, I was just like, it was kind of a thing I did because, I enjoyed comedy and I listened to it a lot when I was a child. My parents were into it and stuff, but it wasn't anything I thought I'd pursue. I transferred out of the BYU and went to Parsons in New York City, and I wanted to, be an artist, a fashion designer or something like that. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And until I met Al Martin and the New York Comedy Club and all that stuff. Before that, I just wanted to be an artist. I didn't know what kind. So it didn't really affect me too much then. Early on, I figured, I always thought I was a little edgy because I was a convert. And so a lot of the Mormons grow up in the church. And so I feel like it's a lot easier to kind of buy all that stuff. when you're a convert, you've already had a life before that, sex or whatever. And so you're just like, you get into it, you're like, oh, okay, this is bullshit. But I lasted a long time. I did about 6 years. So that's where I got paid my Mormon dues. But no, it's, but that's the thing is like I think a lot of people want to be comedians, but they don't live first. That's why I always say when older people complain about not making it in comedy, I'm like, dude, you're perfect for comedy because you've lived a life. It's like, it's like, be old. Comedy is the best thing to start when you're older, because it's like you have these life experiences that can turn into these amazing bits, you know? And so I always say it's like live life a little bit before you do comedy. Because if you just go, you know, right out of high school, and there's prodigies, you know, there's Dave Chappelle's and Pete Davidson's and people that get it really early. But you know, I always like it when people have lived a little. So anyway, my life is, you know, I started later. I was almost 30 when I started. And so, you know, I feel like it's good to have little life experiences. So
I
anyway,
started when I was really, really young at age
yeah,
63.
there you go. So, you know, but isn't it fun? Because you have these life experiences, you know, it's like, can you imagine starting when you're 15? What are you going to talk about at 16, 15? What do you, I like
That's why
bubblegum.
we
Like, what are
get
you
so
going to,
many dick jokes.
yeah, because when you're a young boy, that's all you think about is your dick. So you're going to do lots of dick jokes, you know?
We have nothing else.
And then the girls are always period jokes because that's they're getting their period a lot. So
Yeah. It's so
all that
funny.
hacky stuff.
I was down at the Dirty last night watching, and Drew Thomas was there from the Bronx as
Okay.
the headliner, and
Nice.
Carlos Anthony was the feature.
Okay.
He just got a gig opening up for Eddie Griffin at the Sahara.
Oh, that's great. Very cool.
Yeah. So they show your picture up there on the billboard, on the big screen.
That's fun. That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be in Vegas on Monday. I'm doing the World Series again. Last year I got second, so this year I'm going for the gold. It's pretty
Yes.
cool. It's like you know, at the Strat, they have a week of shows. I don't know if you know, check it out, but love to see
I'll
if
be
you want to come
coming
by.
there. I got a friend
Yeah.
from New York flying in for it, Sandy Bernstein.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'll be there Monday 6 o'clock show. So
Monday, 6
yeah,
o'clock.
yeah, you know, it's interesting because I've done a lot of things and, you know, work and whatever, but I just enjoy things like this for some reason. Like I hate contests normally. Like I've had some bad experiences with that kind of stuff, but I feel like I figured out do them and how to enjoy, you know, moments where there might be kind of a structured contest or pressure or judges or people. You know, it took me a really long time to figure out how to be comfortable on stage when it's some sort of like, you know, contest judgment thing. So probably last year, probably like that was when I figured out how to do it. So because
I want
go
to
ahead.
pick your brain because
Sure.
Adam Hunter let me on his Zoom Dime Bar show, and you were on there.
Yes.
I'm at 8 years in with a brain injury, starting at age 63. So
Okay.
my trajectory is my trajectory, and I wouldn't trade it for all the money in the world. And you're at a level where you're way up here. I mean it when I say that. So I have an opportunity right now to pick your brain. So
Sure, pick it. Pick away.
I want to know, your comedy is so stellar. So can you explain to me? Nobody explains how to put a set together, how to get the rhythm, how to keep the laughs going. I'm the type that I set up, punch, okay, next joke, set up, and I'm trying really hard to transition into keeping the laughs going and making it more bits than jokes. So talk to me about how you write a joke and how you put together a set.
Sure, you know, and I coach people too, and it's just, this is something that a lot of people, you know, want to work on, and yeah, it's a tough thing. You know, I was very set up punch. I still am in a lot of ways. Even somebody like Adam Hunter is very set up punch. But I think what happens is it gets a little disconnected when that's all you're doing, you know. And I think if you can somehow combine, you know, the structure of being a setup punch person, and you can do it as simple as, let's say you do a joke, you know, that's very set up, and okay, let's say I do a thing like I talk about I dated a Jehovah's Witness and we had problems. The problem was every time she came over, I wouldn't let her in, and it's like it's very, you know, dry, perfect, structured, bam, there's the joke. And so I used to just do a joke like that, and then I would just bump to something else and just keep the pop, 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 pop machine gun, you know? And so now what I try to do is I'll do something like that. And then I'll bring up, you know, my Mormonism and maybe a little bit of a story, or do a whole thing on how I view religion, or, you know, I'll try to add some meat to it and some personal, you know, kind of point of view, as opposed to just rushing through the joke. And that has a lot to do with, you know, this is really interesting, but I feel like a laugh can help and ruin a comedian because we're all under this thing where we have to get the laughs, and so we feel insecure when they don't come, you know, all the time, and they don't, you know, we have to get so many a certain second, we got to like kill, we got to crush, and it's difficult, you know. And it's kind of one of the reasons that I moved to Los Angeles, because I was in New York for a really long time. And in New York, it's like, you know, we're club comics in New York. You know, we do short sets, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. And, you know, you just have to murder, because if you don't, you know, you're probably not going to get booked or whatever. And so there's this thing where you're just thinking about murdering. You're not thinking about, how can I grow as a comedian? You know, and it's tough because a lot of times there's not a lot of atmospheres, you know, or situations where people let you grow. And when I ran comedy clubs, you know, I always let people bomb. I let people find it. Of course, I wanted people to do well, especially on a weekend or something. But I always encouraged, you know, people kind of like taking a risk. And so the only way you're going to do anything is taking a risk with maybe a bit that people tell you should talk about. The thing, you know, I remember one time there was a comedian, Vic Hindley. He passed away a few years ago, very good friend of mine. And he one time said to me, he said, look, you know, you're more interesting than your act. And when he said that to me, it was kind of hard to swallow. And I was just like, you know, he's so right. Because I was just getting up there trying to get laughs on weed jokes or whatever, and trying to, you know, instead of like digging in a little. And so I think you just have to find a balance between, you know, kind of structuring your material, your life stories, or, you know, around the punchy stuff, because punchlines are great. But every, you know, even like, you know, Richard Pryor had punches. It's just, he brought you, you know, through his personal life, you know, in such a way that you didn't feel like it was just a joke. Like you feel like he was sharing his life with you. And so I think that's the thing too I've learned, is like, you know, we're basically just sharing ourselves with these people, and concentrate more on being yourself as opposed to being a comic that's killing all the time. Because a lot of guys kill all the time and they don't do any new material. And it's the same structured thing. I've very much have fallen into this. And so, you know, and that's all they are, is a guy that kills, as opposed to, you know, somebody that's sharing something. And I've learned a lot working with the people that I work with. I've been blessed to work with some great people. I'm on tour now with Nate Bargatze, who's probably one of the biggest comedians right now. He's, you know, he's playing theaters, and like I'm going to be in Phoenix, Arizona on September 23rd, opening from the Celebrity Theater. He's filming his special on the 24th. And, you know, watching that guy work every night has been just the greatest thing that I could possibly ever kind of, you know, take in as a comedian. And because there's nobody working today, in my opinion, that is more himself on stage. And he's basically takes his time. He's not going for a cheap laugh. Like he's sharing his life. This is me. I'm from Tennessee, and I got one daughter, and I, you know, my dad's a magician, and my wife likes to get on me. And he just, you know, he just shares his life. He's not trying to be a joke guy. He knows his life is silly and ridiculous. And a lot of it is just common stuff, but it's stuff that, you know, a lot of people can relate to, you know, nagging with the wife or the thing or whatever it is, that funny little things. And so that's helped a lot, is watching that guy rise to success, you know. And he was my barker in New York. You know, he would hand out flyers, and then to watch him get to where he is today, and just being able to really just kind of absorb that stuff has been great. And he helps me kind of take risk. So that's what I would say is just, you know, spread it out. You know, take your jokes that work, and every time you do a setup punch joke, add a little anecdote, add a little story, something personal to it. Don't just run from the next one to the next topic. Like if you're doing a joke, it's a setup punch about getting older or whatever, then maybe do something that's a little more personal about getting older, or something that's, you know, whatever. Like if you do one joke about, you know, people call you ma'am all the time or whatever, then do a joke about dating in your older years and talk about this. Like just spread it out. Don't just make it just one quick joke and then you're gone. You know,
Okay.
so I think that's what a lot of comics do, is they don't you know, they don't kind of like milk it out, you know. That's the one thing about, I remember I got to see George Carlin a few times, and Carlin was so good. It wasn't a lot of personal stuff, but it was his personal views.
Yeah.
And but he would, once George Carlin got a hold of a premise, it was gone. There's nothing you could possibly say that George didn't say about it, because he would just milk it to death. Like he would take everything, he would just do bam, bam, bam. So I think we just, as comics, it's like we have a tendency, and it has a lot to do with our short spots. You know, sometimes you only get 5 minutes, you only get 7 minutes at Flappers, or you get 6 minutes this here or this club, and that's hard. It's hard to breathe on stage, and we want to get laughs. And I'm not sitting here saying get up there and bomb, but sometimes, you know, when you have an opportunity, let's say you get a 5-minute set, then tell yourself, look, this time I'm only going to talk about this one thing. I'm not going to try to cram in 8 jokes in 5 minutes. I'm going to talk about one premise. And this premise is going to be my dog or my kid or my diet or whatever it is, just one thing. So try that and see how, you know, it works, because I feel like that will force you to kind of embellish a little more and not be so quick punch. But at the same time, as I preach all that shit, I enjoy, you know, a Stephen Wright or, you know, a Mitch Hedberg, or, you know, I love all that stuff. So it's like, you know, and then, you know, it's just a weird thing, because it's like, unfortunately, you know, people, every time you're a good at setup and punch, people always feel like it's not enough. But I think there's, you know, there's time and a place for it as well. So, you know, I feel like if you're playing a crowd that's a little older or whatever, it's like, you know, every time, because that's the thing, is I feel like I'm good at setup and punch, and it helps me a lot, especially in LA, because in LA they take what I just said sometimes a little too far, where it's like there's no setup punch, it's a lot of stories, it's a lot of like kind of just, it's talky and it's chatty and it's not tight. And so, you know, I just did the Burbank Comedy Festival, and that was fun. And I remember, you know, a lot of the comics were all great. They were all great comics, but they were struggling a little bit with the crowd, because a lot of them were doing stories in a short amount of time and stuff like that. And then I just went up and just bam, bam, bam. And so sometimes you can use it, but I feel like if you're trying to do an album, or you're trying to, you know, take yourself further, I think you got to kind of, you know, breathe a little on stage and take a risk and be okay. The best thing about punchlines is you have them. So if you have like a setup punch joke, save it. Just save it and get up there and then tell your thing that's maybe a little wordy. And then if you start to lose the crowd, then you pull into your comedy holster, and then you got a punch joke. And then you can get to the next thing. Like, hold on to those jokes. A lot of times we waste our good laugh jokes. And so those things can kind of help you through a set when you've decided to be a little, you know, wordy or a little more personal or whatever. You know, then you can save your set by kind of interjecting those throughout your set instead of using them all at once up top. You know what I mean?
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
I want to ask you two more things.
Yes.
I want to ask you, when you're writing a joke, like I get inspired to write a joke because I hear a punchline. I just hear something beautiful that should be a punchline, and then I'll create a whole thing to make it fit
Okay.
And it might be true. It wasn't true at the beginning. Now, yeah, I hear a punchline, I'll make it about something true about my life. I've learned to be authentic. But what do you get inspired by hearing anything and then writing? Or do you just write and then you find the humor later?
Yeah, it's not one thing particularly, but I feel like, yeah, yeah, I think I do. I also hear the punchline sometimes before, the structure of the joke. Like I'll think of something is a funny premise. Like it's funny, I'm working on this one thing, this one joke about, my girlfriend has misophonia, and it's like apparently it's a thing where when you hear noises, she kind of goes into rage, like ticking, beeping, apparently my breathing. And so that's terrifying. And and then when I started to write this joke, I was just like, somebody had said how funny is it to think of Dustin like walking around trying not to breathe rhythmically, and they were like, just like an act out of like trying to like, a weird way of breathing. And I remember when I did the joke the first time, I tried to do the act out of not breathing rhythmically, and it just wasn't in my realm of a performer. Like I'm not a big act out guy. I'm fidgety and I move a lot and I'm energy, but I'm not like an act out guy. And so it didn't work because I was second guessing my act out performance. And so, it's a joke that I think is so funny and original and weird, and I could never get it to land. And then I just put up a clip on it, but I was in Alabama, and it just seemed to work when I just dropped it as like, my breathing, which is terrifying. And then then the other thing was just like, how hard it is to try not to breathe rhythmically, so she doesn't stab me when I'm sleeping. And that was it. And I didn't try to do a big act out thing. So I would think like, whatever's natural to you, keep that, because sometimes we try to do what I would call an impression of being a comedian as opposed to being ourselves. And so we think like, somebody, a real comedian, a Bill Burr, or somebody big or whatever, would do it this way. So we try to do it their way, and it falls short because it's not our own sensibilities. And so I would just basically just try to stay true to how you talk and how you find things funny, and try to structure it that way. But I'm a big believer in writing every day. I'm a big believer in forcing yourself to write. I do and I'll have you on it. I do a Zoom show on Twitch, and I know a lot of the Zoom shows are done. People don't want to do them anymore because I feel like people feel like it's uncomfortable. It's hard to get laughs, and it is, and it is very difficult to get laughs. And but I try to do. I only do it because I don't want to go to an open mic and do new stuff, because to me that's uncomfortable. But I would rather my living room and do some new things I've never done before, and maybe nobody laughs or whatever, but at least I got it out of my mouth. And so I feel like that's one way of me writing. And so what it does, though, I do it every week, it forces me to come up with new material because it's a lot of the same audience. And so even when we did the Adam Hunter thing, it was that was a lot of the same audiences, a lot of the same comics. And so I refuse to do the same material all the time in front of the same people. And so it forces me to write. So I think you got to find something that's going to force you to come up with new material. And so that's something that I've done, that I do, that, just it'll make me like, and I'll be like, oh shit, it's like, I got 2 hours. I got to come up with new stuff. So I will literally write jokes right before the show starts. And it forces me to do that, as we're a club, if it's a crowd that hasn't seen me, I'll just get up and, I'll do a tight 10 or whatever jokes I know they're going to work, or, so it's not as much pressure, but you should put pressure on yourself to write new jokes. And I think open mics are great. I just think for me, it's not something I want to do at this point, but, so I basically, it's an open mic online, for myself. So
yeah. I love being on Zoom because, I'm older and people don't always, you have to get who I am to get on board with what I'm talking about. And on
Yeah.
Zoom, I can be like, like, and in an audience, they might not really get my wackiness as fast. So Zoom works for me.
Yeah, I think it works for a lot of us. You just have to, it's. I just think it has a lot to do with, people just wanting to get back into live performances, and there's nothing like an in-person show, So I think a lot of it is just, just kind of fatted out because of the pandemic or whatever, and people, just
The
want.
last question I have to ask
Sure.
you,
Yes.
picking your brain is like a master class,
Thank you.
So yes, and so when you're, what type of what type of comedian are you? When you walk into a brand new venue and you got to go up on stage within the hour, and you're watching them laugh at the host and the opener and the feature, do you watch, or are you confident with your material and you're just going to bring your material? Or do you get into the psyche of everything and switch up your material based on what they're laughing about?
I don't think I've ever had a set that I liked personally when I didn't watch the audience in the show and the comics before me. So every time I don't do that, it's not a very good set. I feel like every time I watch the show, and even if it's just a couple of comedians or maybe it's just a little bit of the MC, every single time I always have a good set. It's like one of those things where a lot of comics, I get so mad. I used to get mad when I ran clubs because brand new comics would just go in the green room and try to schmooze with all the older comics instead of watching the show. And so every time I don't do it, I regret it every time. And so I think it's essential to watch the MC for a couple of minutes, see how the crowd's responding to their material, see what they're doing. And if there's other comics on the show, like watch the material that's hitting. And then sometimes, respectfully, you can kind of piggyback off of kind of what people say. And like, let's see some guy who's like, I just got a divorce or whatever. Then you can get up on stage and be like, hey, you got a divorce. I'm trying to get one or whatever. And you play with the guy. And I'm a big, I think the best thing you can do as a comedian, in my opinion, this is only my opinion, is to get off stage and have a good set and be like, oh, damn, I forgot to do that joke. Because what that means is you lost yourself in the moment and you didn't need to do all your jokes. And so I feel like that's something I try to do up front, is play around and be improv-y and see where the crowd takes me. And so I feel like we rush to our bits too quick. And sometimes it's appropriate if it's a showcase set or something, you got to get to your jokes. But even then, it's like show a little bit of looseness, It's like I remember I did the Burbank Comedy Festival last year, and they had some really big TV people there. And I remember them coming up to me and they were saying, we thought you were great because you were the only comedian that we saw out of like, I don't know, maybe there's 50 or 60 or whatever, that did a different set every show and, and kind of played around and whatever. And so I feel like, people respond to that. So that's definitely something. Watch the show, watch the comic, and don't be I understand because we're artists, we're heady. And if you have kind of like a pre-show thing you do and you need to listen to music, you need to take your time, you need to get your coffee. I get all that because I do all that too. But take the time to know what's going on in the room. You can always tell a comedian that didn't watch the show. You can always, and a lot of times they do the same freaking material.
Yes.
It's like, because they didn't watch the show. So, and that's what I've had this happen to me before, and it's the worst when you get on stage and you do the exact same premise, especially topical stuff, and you're just like, you get the same freaking Trump joke and the same, so it's like, watch the show. And a lot of times I'll watch the show. Somebody will do something I was going to do, and I'll change my whole thing. And I'll be like, I'm not going to get up there and do the same joke. I'm going to put this joke here and switch it around and do something different. So for that alone, it's important to watch the show, especially if you're a younger comic. If you're a pro and you know what you do, okay, I guess you can get up there and slam. But I'm a pro and I can slam and I still do way better. My bar is pretty high for myself, but I do way better when I watch the show. And so, and sometimes you don't have the opportunity to watch show. I mean, I do 2-man shows and, with TJ Miller and stuff, and I have to just walk out on stage. I'm the first comic. And so sometimes you don't have that, but sit there and I will watch that audience come in that room. And
what do you look for when you watch them?
I look for somebody interesting to play with. I look to see who's in a couple. I look to see, what the diversity of the room is and where they're setting. I'm looking for some, who's dressed ridiculous. I'm looking for, the guy wearing shorts. I'm looking for, I'm taking in all these things. So when I get up there, especially if I'm the first comic emceeing and opening or whatever, I know I need to play around a little bit. So I will basically just kind of like in a Rolodex all these things that are happening, all these details off of the people when I walk in or when they walk in. So it's just something that I do. If I don't have an opportunity to watch a show, I'll watch the audience come in, and I'll just kind of, you'll see me.
You're pretty well known, so you can't act like you're just standing there in the crowd. They're going to know that you're in the show if you just hang around and talk to them.
Yeah, I don't care. Rodney Dangerfield used to every time when he did his breakout performance on the Ed Sullivan Show, he was outside when the people were coming in to Ed Sullivan, and he worked the line. And like he was just like, hey, how you doing? I'm Rodney. Hey, look at this guy. Hey, nice tie. What, did you win that in a fair? Blah, blah. And he worked the whole line. And so by the time when he got up on stage, the crowd had already seen him on the sidewalk. And so he got to play with them and like get a sense of them, and they loved him already, and they hadn't even seen his act. So that's one of my favorite stories, because it's like the audience doesn't care if because I've talked to people. I've had people walk in and they know I'm on the show. Some know who I am, some don't. They just know I'm a comedian. And I'll say, hey, I said, there'll be a big group. I go, is there anybody here I should make fun of? And I'll talk to them before they've even set out. So I'll do that sometimes, not all the time, but I'll get to know the people. If it's like a bachelorette party, I'm like, oh, when she get married, or I'll get some information sometimes, and it just depends on the mood I'm in, because sometimes I don't want to talk to them, and you can always just peek your head. They don't have to see you. You can, that you don't have to be in the showroom. I mean, a lot of times you can just kind of look, and they don't always know. People are, kind of into themselves when they first get settled. You know what I mean?
Why is it? One last little question.
Sure.
Why is
Absolutely.
it that when you see a couple and you tell them you're a comedian, the wife is always the one to say, make fun of him? It's never the man saying. Because
men know the repercussions of, telling us to make fun of the woman. And I'm not going to make fun of, we saw what happens when you make fun of a woman. Chris Rock, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's, you're better off making fun of the guy. If we've learned anything in the last year, it's like, make fun of the husband. Don't make fun of the wife. They'll keep you from getting punched. So I think that's the one thing.
You had a lot of successes in movies, and you have a lot of specials. So can you let people know a couple of the movies you're proud of and your specials, and where to get your specials? And
well, mostly more TV than movies.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, I did. I got to, one of the biggest thrills of my life was when I was a kid. We had the Love Boat, and so it was always so fun to watch. Was it Charo, the one with Charo with the guitar and everything? It was always great, and because the Love Boat always had people playing themselves, and it was like such a, you know what I mean? There was like guest starring Charo, and then you see her playing the guitar. So I got to play myself in an HBO TV show called Crashing, and that was fun. I got to be the comedian Dustin Chafin. I got to do my act. I got to, whatever. And so that was a really cool moment to kind of like, it was a Judd Apatow directed thing. So it was like a big deal. Pete Holmes is another young comic that I took care of. And that's the thing. This is what I will say to people. It's like, don't be an asshole. Be a good person. Be kind. Be nice to people. Because you know what? It's like, first of all, you just should. Not because it'll come back, but just because you should. You should. But once in a while, those people remember when you were good to them, and they put you in TV shows and they put you on tours and theaters because you helped them and you weren't a jerk to them when they first started. And so I think that's something important that I've learned. So a lot of the TV I've gotten, I did Showtime, I did certain things, comics looked out for me. I'd say, hey, could you recommend me, for this TV show? Could you recommend me for the thing? And, so I've done some fun things. I did, the Showtime thing was White Boys in the Hood. It was a few years ago, but that, I don't think you could do that show now. But basically it was white comics doing black jokes in front of, black crowds. And so it was like a kind of Eminem comedy, if you will. And because I came up through kind of urban rooms in New York City. And so I played a lot of Latino and African-American rooms and stuff. And so I kind of got my chops on those kinds of rooms. And I feel like it made me funnier because, those crowds won't just give it to you. So you really got to bring it. And so that was a fun moment. I got to do that show. It was one of my first big credits, and I got to, perform and do that. And and
both of those had huge followings. They were big deals.
It was fun. Yeah, I got some good things out of it. And then I did this thing on Howard Stern. They did a comedy thing, and got to be on Stern and whatnot. So it's like I did a lot of cool things, a lot of Sirius XM shows, and I've written for a lot of shows, and I was a producer for iHeartRadio and did a lot of stuff like that. So I've done some fun things, but I'm just getting started, and I think that's the thing with comedy. It's like you can't just sit on your laurels and things. You gotta keep coming up with new ideas. And I'm excited for the Dry Bar special. I think that's gonna rejuvenate me with kind of younger viewers and things. And so I think it's just important to keep doing stuff and keep working on things. But and if you're a young comic or an older comic that's starting young or whatever the case may be, I coach people. You can check me out, DM me, and I can work with you one-on-one and whatever, because I love comedy and I love sharing all the things that I've learned. And I feel like lifting people up is really what we should be doing, and that's really the goal.
Absolutely. So you're on tour with Nate Bargatze.
Yes. And TJ Miller. Yeah.
And TJ Miller. Those are huge comedians, as you are. You're in the ballpark with the hugest of the hugest.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here today. And thank you for any kind of kindness that you've given back to me. I appreciate you so much. Where do you want people to follow you, Dustin?
You can just follow me at Dustin_Chafin. Go to my website, DustinChafin.com. And there's all my dates and merch and albums and all that stuff's on there. So I appreciate it. Thanks, Linda. It was a lot of fun. Sorry I was late.
Thank you so much. No problem at all. I'll see you on Monday at 6:00
Sounds fun.
And you're at the Stratosphere?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right.
I love that club.
I could use some laughs, so that'll be fun.
Yes.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.